Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's CITI program webinar. Today's topic is Understanding Decentralized Clinical Trials and Virtual Study Visits, and it is presented by Amanda Rangel. Just a few quick notes. This webinar is for educational purposes only. It is not designed to provide legal advice or legal guidance. You should consult with your organization's attorneys if you have any questions or concerns about the relevant laws and regulations that may be discussed in this webinar. In addition, the views expressed in the webinar are solely those of the presenter. Now, let me tell you about today's presenter. We are lucky to have Amanda Rangel today present on DCTs. Amanda has 17 years clinical trial experience, including roles as a clinical research coordinator and in patient recruitment, business development, and operations. As the head of virtual trial solutions with VirTrial, she works closely with clinical research sites, CROs, pharma, and other technology solution providers to implement virtual trials in a responsible manner for all key stakeholders involved. And now I'm going to pass the mic to Amanda.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Just to go over conflicts of interest, I have no relevant personal, professional, financial relationships with respect to this educational activity. I'm excited to present the learning objectives for today. As Margaret mentioned, my name is Amanda Rangel. I am head of virtual trial solutions for VirTrial, a Signet Health company. And over the past 2 years, I've been instrumental in the implementation of decentralized clinical trials or virtual trials as we've come to know them. So today's learning objectives will go over, first, identify differences between traditional trials and decentralized clinical trials, also known as DCTs for short. Also review a brief history of the development of DCTs. Learn about the terminology, regulations, and best practices of DCTs. And also, and very fun, learn appropriate preparation for interactions during and overall conduct for virtual visits. So based on those learning objectives, today's training will be divided into 3 sections: the evolution from traditional trials to decentralized clinical trials, terminology, regulations, and best practices, and conducting a virtual visit. So let's start with the evolution of DCTs. No change comes about unless there is a need for change. So what's the need for DCTs? The time and cost to get new therapies to market, and that means to the patients who actually need them, is very long and costly. And one of the main reasons for this stems from patient enrollment in clinical trials. Enrollment is almost always delayed. Patient compliance and retention are an issue due to the actual burden of clinical trial participation on patients. And when delays happen with enrollment or when patients drop out of studies, pharma companies can't get the data needed quickly enough to obtain regulatory approvals, and thus delaying time to market. So what you're seeing on this slide are some of the reasons why patients don't participate in clinical trials. This includes feedback from patients surveyed by the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation in collaboration with CISCRP and Cornell University. Every day a trial is delayed is $37,000 cost to the sponsor of that trial. And as I mentioned previously, there's a big dropout rate in trials, which is 30% for your average phase 3 trial. The other thing is a lot of patients don't have access to clinical trials to begin with. We see here that less than 5% of Americans actually participate in clinical trials. So this is just the cost in dollars. And as patient care experts on this training call, think about the lost time that this means for those depending on the development of new therapies. So to a patient, this may ultimately mean the difference in having treatment options available to them or not. With the release of the most recent FDA guidance on the conduct of clinical trials during COVID, I believe we're seeing much more leniency on what those trials are called in an effort to simply make them happen. So to reduce the barriers and get them out to sites. So some alternative terms that you may hear to reference these, direct-to-patient trials, virtual trials, hybrid trials, which are basically a hybrid of traditional elements with decentralized clinical trial elements. So think about certain visits still occur in the clinical research site, whereas other visits can occur outside of the clinical research site. And then remote trials. Now, in mentioning the definition or, the FDA definition of decentralized trials, These trials use processes and technologies that differ from the traditional clinical trial model. So I wanted to give some examples here of these alternate processes and technologies. As a professional, it's important to understand the strengths and weaknesses of DCTs for different protocol design types and to know when to best employ different elements. Regulations, policies, and best practices still apply to decentralized clinical trials, and investigators and study teams, IRBs, and other research professionals should try to learn more about DCTs to ensure the appropriate conduct of ethical, compliant trials with high data integrity and human subject protections.
Great. Thank you, Amanda. That was a very helpful overview of DCTs and virtual study visits. I also invite everyone to review our content offerings regularly, as we are continually adding new courses and webinars in various areas of research, ethics, compliance, and professional development.